This week, Anthropic reported on their groundbreaking Mythos model, the most powerful cybersecurity model that they've ever produced. And what they reported is that in their Project Glasswing, they've fixed thousands and thousands of critical bugs. But the most important takeaway from this report is that something has happened that is going to completely flip how we think about how labor is being replaced by AI, which is this Mythos model, by finding bugs, found so many bugs so quickly that it created more work for human beings than they could keep up with. So rather than AI taking away human labor by figuring out how to do their work faster, what it's done is it's removed a constraint to creating work for people so quickly that there's now more work to fix all these bugs than people have the capacity to do. And so that's flipping the whole equation around. Is AI going to actually make us work harder than we've ever worked? I'm Matt Pashensky. I'm here with Ian Sweeney. This is the Breakneck Podcast, and we're going to lay all of this out. Ian, what are your thoughts so far? You were the one who sent me this article.
Well, it's interesting, the parallels between this and Y2K, right? For those who remember, Y2K was a period of time where, a particular date and time, 1st of January 2020, when we felt that all our software was going to fall apart. And we didn't really realize it until we got a little bit closer. There was an aha moment and the industry went, oh shit, I think we're in trouble. And we're having that moment now. And Mythos came out about 4 to 6 weeks ago, was not made generally available, given to a bunch of big companies who were able to take it, understand it, apply it to their code base and say, okay, what's the situation? Where are we at? And they've reinforced what Anthropic announced 6 weeks ago. And they said, we're in trouble. These things find bugs much quicker than we've ever been able to find them before. So there's a parallel. We have the whole industry, let's call it in turmoil, with this situation of, oh crap, we've got all this work to do. Now, different time.
And when we say bugs, like the Y2K bug, I think everyone felt, it was all a big deal about nothing. But the types of bugs that we're talking about here are not, well, my phone doesn't, play my video fast enough. We're talking about networks being hacked so that all of your financial data and your money, medical records, all of that stuff becoming completely available. We're talking about the U.S. government's secret spying files and all things being made available to the Chinese, because Mythos is only about a few months ahead of the best Chinese models. And so if Mythos can find these critical vulnerabilities in our cybersecurity system, including our military cybersecurity system, do our missiles launch? Do our planes stay in the air? Well, these are all related to software that Mythos might be able to find. But if we wait 6 months, Chinese models are very likely already starting to scan our critical infrastructure to find ways to compromise us. So it's a big, big deal for the government. And I think the government, after the release of Mythos, stepped back and said, actually, we were going to ban Anthropic because, Pete Hegseth got in a fight with Dario or something like that. But we're going to step back on this. So Mythos has changed everything. It's great at finding these critical vulnerabilities. It's also great at fixing them, but it's much better at finding them than it is at fixing them. It's the best model in the world for building cybersecurity fixes, but it's not good enough. And it's still, what they said in this report is that it's finding so many of these bugs that the human reviewers of open source systems are completely overwhelmed. And the only reason that the private companies that are using Project Glasswing and using Mythos is because they just have so much money to throw at the problem that they can hire more people and get them to do it. So it's creating more work for people than existed before. And this is work that you can't skip because, again, the Chinese are going to come in. Or whoever, Russians, French. I don't want to pick on Chinese people, wonderful people, but
well, you have these asymmetries, right? Where we are finding more of them than we can fix, right? We need humans to fix them. That's one asymmetry, and the other asymmetry is to take advantage of these security vulnerabilities is a lot easier, a lot quicker than to fix them, right? So, and we pretty soon won't be the only ones who can uncover them. Right. So we're in a little bit of a bind, maybe the biggest bind we've been in so far with AI.
Obviously, the threat to security, the threat to critical infrastructure, that power outage, was that random, or was that something that was caused by a state actor or a private company with access to these models? Uh, on the other hand, there have always been these types of, zero-day vulnerabilities. Jeff Bezos famously got his phone hacked by the Saudi government with a WhatsApp worm. It was like if you opened a WhatsApp link, it took control of your phone, and it broke up his marriage. It cost him hundreds of billions of dollars, right? These are the type of things we're talking about. These have always been around, and state actors have used them. I think the particular vulnerability was actually found by a Israeli defense company called, it was just a bug on your phone, right? These are real world problems. These are not abstract.
We shouldn't be laughing, but you're right. I mean, they really are. So let's okay. Let's zoom out a little bit. For the Jeff Bezos of the world, for the governments, for the states, there's an awful lot at stake.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about the mere mortals in the world, or the mere mortal businesses, right? Medium-sized businesses, small businesses, those types of businesses that don't have huge resources to resolve these types of issues. How's it going to play out?
Well, that's one of the really big changes that we talked about last time with Mythos. Is it's going from a world where every model, the second it came, was made available to everybody simultaneously, right? And with Mythos is the first one that Anthropic has decided to put behind not just a paywall, but only certain large enterprises had access to that, which gives asymmetric capabilities to the largest companies. Right. And that's a very big change. Now, the reason is those, Palo Alto Networks is one of the Project Glasswing, Cisco. Billions of dollars daily are flowing through critical networking equipment run by those companies. Right. So we need those protected so we don't have a recession caused by, some kind of software vulnerability. The question is, how will they make this type of capability available to a company, a startup? I think it's going to change dramatically the economics if it continues in this way, that small companies will have to license their software again from large companies, else they will present, maybe they just are producing vulnerabilities. And, it's always been that way. I don't build my own laptop and I don't build my own networking gear. I license it from AWS and from Apple. But it's going to significantly put more pressure to have these large companies if they're the only ones with cybersecurity models. And so same thing, as the governments can find bugs and then not tell us about it, that will give more control to the Saudi government and the Iranian government and things if they're the only ones with access to these models. And so some of the democratization of security and intelligence that was kind of part of the excitement about AI is potentially going away, because only the big guys will really get the smart models.
Well, yeah, the democratization of software in and of itself, driven by the cost of developing software going down, which has been a big promise here, like anybody can write software. Potentially this is going to put a big break on it, in the sense that, anybody nowadays with $20 can build a piece of software. Now, there's plenty of people building software correctly at lower costs now, but you need both the ability to build that software, to diagnose it for security vulnerabilities, and the ability to fix it now. Access to the model and then access to the resources to build it. So it's going to be super interesting to see how this cascades down from the large entities.
This is I think the interesting frame that we presented at the beginning, which is the main constraint to fixing these bugs is security experts. And I think this is potentially the most measurable instance of a speculative topic, which is AI actually making us all busier? The whole huge threat is once AI gets intelligent, we would be put out of work. But maybe, and this is what, you framed this at the beginning when we were chatting about this, maybe AI is becoming our boss, and maybe it's actually a much more intelligent boss than we've ever had before. Maybe we're going to do more things, be more useful, be more valuable as laborers, have more meaningful work, because all the drudge work happens to be real. Computers are really good at it, but there are going to be those things that humans are good at that AI is not. And there'll be so much of it that will be overwhelmed. And so at least in one place where we have the best model in the world doing something that's extremely valuable, and it's very measurable, like they talked about the number of open vulnerabilities and the pipeline of things that got fixed, they have a very measurable way to say, actually, this one application of AI where we have all of this very best models, super clear value, super measurable. Actually, AI is creating more work for people and more meaningful work than previously. And we've talked about people who kind of get really into Claude Code. Like,
Yeah.
you and I remember in December, you were like, you got to try Claude Code. Okay, I'll try it out. I think Cowork had just come out, and I downloaded it for the first time. My whole winter break was evaporated into, I spent all day, every day locked in if I didn't have to be with my children, and which I love. I love being with my children.
And your
I'll say it
wife.
that way, but and my wife, of course. But then there's Claude Code, and you could always go up and build something you always had dreamed of. So I built video games I had thought about for years. I one time in the back of a Uber rewrote one of my physics papers from like 2008, and I like validated a result that I wanted to put in the paper and I never got around to. And I was like, oh, that wouldn't have worked. Okay, cool. Like I was doing all kinds of, I had a backlog of decades of computer projects I wanted to do that over, December and January, I finished a whole bunch of them, and I got bored of a few, and then a few I've kept up, and my startup has become much more demanding because we're doing more work, we're making more money. Maybe the whole thesis that AI is going to replace us is completely false, and maybe Mythos is going to, when it comes to not just security, which is good at, but when it comes to marketing, it's going to need more marketers. When it comes to legal, there's going to be more legal. And maybe we're just going to have much better functioning companies, and we'll all be richer, but also more busy than we've ever been. And I think that's a possibility that a lot of people have discounted, but it seems in this case not to be the case.
Yeah. Every Monday morning, I try to do this exercise where I have 25 things on my mind I want to do this week, and I try and force myself to distill it down into the 3 things. I imagine myself on the Friday saying, if I did those 3 things, was that a valuable week? And the answer is yes. It's an attempt to work out what's important, and that gives me, the end of the week, I have a sense of accomplishment if I do those. Sometimes I adjust, but I do that exercise to really what is valuable stuff, because I get kind of instinctive value and validation myself when I do stuff that is important. Maybe AI is going to be just better than us at telling us these are the important things. You will be valuable if you do these things. So, we talk about having AI overlords or AI bosses, but actually, if you cast it that way in a sense of, do you want to do stuff that's really important and valuable? Then maybe I do want an AI boss.
So imagine if the model, instead of, hey, there's a certain amount of work and AI is going to bump me over and do the work for me and I'm going to have nothing to do. There's not very many things in the world that will pay you money to do, right? I was a physicist for a long time. They pay you about what it's worth. And physics is much harder and much more interesting, in my opinion. But the economic systems behind doing that just weren't quite developed enough. And so, now I have friends that make a ton of money doing, quantum cryptography. I was like, that would have been cool if that was around maybe 15, 20 years ago. And now there's all these AI quantum startups. I was like, oh, that would have been great if it had been around when I had graduated. But instead I went and did, enterprise, business analytics stuff. And that was what was paying back then, right? Are building cool quantum systems, is that valuable? Of course it's valuable. It's just the infrastructure wasn't there in 2011 when I finished my PhD. So I didn't get a job in that. I could have gotten a job, but we wouldn't have paid very much. Now people are making a lot of money because things are advancing. There's a lot of situations like that where AI could potentially fill in some of these gaps, some of these O-rings. They talk about the O-rings. Like, if you have a leak, every step of that pipeline, you have another leak. If you start fixing those leaks, the pipeline exponentially improves, right? Because you're having exponential losses. And so if you fix those pipes, well, if it just happened to be very hard to do one little thing that AI is good at, now the entire pipeline gets exponentially stronger, and there's going to be so many more jobs doing cool, meaningful stuff instead of like an email job, which, I got very good at email and calendars and using, various analytic software and things like that. But in terms of like what I truly wanted to do when I was young, those economic opportunities weren't there. And those are starting to be things that you could do economically and in a way that you would get paid a lot. That's changing. I think it's something that everyone has a bias in the media towards doom and negativity. Anyway, I tend to be an optimist, and I think this Mythos example is so crystal clear that at least in this situation, it might not be at all what we expect, and our bias towards doom and negativity and worrying about ourselves is actually wrong, and there's going to actually be more work. And in my personal experience, like I said, and you say the same, it's really, really hard to keep up with all the things that I want to do with AI every day because there's just not enough hours in the day. That's very different than a world that is progressively moving towards I have no role to play. On the other hand, maybe, it goes up for a little bit and then it comes back down. Who knows? But I mean, at least starting point, it seems like AI is pushing us to do more interesting stuff and has more use for people than we did a year ago.
Agreed. Okay. What do we talk about next? You want to talk about Google I/O?
Yeah, you read. Sorry,
I did.
I tried to read the Pope's encyclical. If anybody wanted a hot take on the Pope's encyclical, I got about 2 paragraphs in before I gave up. I got distracted, didn't read Google I/O. What happened at Google I/O this week?
Apparently they launched 100 things. I read the blog post that said 100 things. There weren't really 100 things, so I'm not going to walk you through all of them. But I am going to talk about 2 O-rings, as you call them. We need these continuity in processes, and various manifestations of AI technology are working in different sort of workflows. And the 2 I want to talk about today are one of my favorites, visuals. So in this case, video generation. And then the other, and maybe we'll start here, is WebMCP. So WebMCP is not new, but let me tell you what it is if you're not familiar with it. It is a proposed standard to make websites more navigable for agents. It's out of Google, obviously. And it's this idea, if you've ever pointed Claude or anything at a website and said, hey, can you read this and tell me what's going on? More often than not, it'll say something like, oh, it's JavaScript rendered, I wasn't able to read it, or it's bot blocked, or whatever it is. And so that is a huge challenge for a bunch of reasons. A huge challenge for us as users when we want to get some information from around the world, or we wanted to take action. In fact, if you want to go back, is it 3 months ago now since we did the agentic commerce demo? When our minds were blown. If you want to look up that episode, you'll see a great example of an agent navigating a website where we thought it was going to get stopped. So this challenge of we've got all this information, understanding, and actionability, if you want to call it that, on websites that are not accessible to agents. And the way it works essentially is it takes your website and makes it usable by an agent. So seems like a pretty piece of technology that none of us should care about, but it's going to unlock, it's that O-ring, to use your terminology. It's a really critical O-ring or piece of continuity in this process of getting information from the internet into agents.
Yeah, and the thing I was hearing about all week from my team was anti-gravity 2.0, and everyone's starting to think in terms of harnesses. And so if we look at the stack, we have obviously that base LLM model and things like skills and MCPs, but then Google Anti-Gravity is built on top of WebMCP, which is a Model Context Protocol, which is a way of exchanging capabilities with an agent, making them discoverable and then accessible to the context window so the agent knows to use them, right? And all of this together is forming what people call the harness, which you have things like OpenClaw, Pi, which is I think OpenClaw was based on Pi. You have Claude Code. These are all harnesses that include lots of things like the LLM, but also things like monitoring, sandboxing, and observability, all of that on the one hand, and then also evals that you can do regression tests and make sure that the whole system is performing well. And we call all of that a harness together, including all kinds of long-term memory and memory storage, reset capabilities if the session is ended. And so that's Google Anti-Gravity is kind of trying to build with a different substrate with this WebMCP, a more open and extensible. But people are excited about Google this week. So,
I mean, if anything, maybe I've said this already, but I think this might be the year of the AI harness, right? And to throw some different language at it for a second, we got excited about Claude Cowork and a bunch of other things. Really, where we're moving versus last year is from kind of unstructured use of AI into structured use of AI. Why do you need structure? You only need structure is expensive to build, right? Why do you build a house? Because you want to live in it for decades, right? But
Mm-hmm.
this year we're getting to the point of actually building structure, or AKA harnesses around AI
Mm-hmm.
to build business outcomes. So WebMCP is a building block, a component of building, and it's a really big
Mm-hmm.
one. It's surprising it's taken this long. We'll see if it takes off or not, but whether this is the technology that does it or not, we're going to need to solve this problem of making those websites
We had a few questions last year. Number one, we said, would agents become something that people, I think we talked about agents in the meeting. So it's kind of like we're predicting year of the harness, which I tend to agree with you, but our predictions in the past, let's review our predictions. One, beginning in 2025, you and I immediately had the question of, are agents going to be a thing? And our standard for the agents was, are you going to give the agent a bunch of money and just let it rip? And we got to the end of 2025. I remember it was like December 5th, around then. And everybody was like, yeah, it didn't really happen. And then 2 months later, it had completely happened. And I think if you're talking now, people are talking about like, oh, I got defrauded because my open claw spent a whole bunch of money on a fake website or something like that. So, and the COO of Uber is saying we're spending too much money on tokens. Well, these are very much fit the mold of our standard for agentic success in early 2025. It took us about 15 months to get where we thought it would get in like 11, 12 months. The second question we had last year was what replaces the browser? And when I hear MCP, I get excited about agents. When I hear web MCP and replacing websites, now I start to see the whole picture, whereas instead of a browser, we have a harness. And so that was a big question we had last year. And by the end of the year, again, we're like, no, I mean, the website's still a website. But now my customers are using our MCP 10 times more than our web dashboards. And so I'm trying to push all of our new customers and our existing customers as well. Like, stop using our old product. Please use it as part of your Claude code session, because then it's you and Claude using all of Pact's data versus just I could probably look that up on Pact. Then you go, you click, maybe you read it, you copy, paste, you take it over. Now all of that can be done via MCP, and the Claude session pulls way more data and things that I've never read, more than I could read, into context, and reminds me of things, helps me do planning, helps me do all kinds of activities. And so the question is, is Pact different than the harness? Can it remain? Is it just a component? I have my own reasoning, but that's going to be a big question for every website. But at minimum, I have started to feel in my own business the switch from website to what comes next. And I think that's the harness, was our replacement. We had what was it called? The Apollo browser. There was these different browsers that they brought out that kind of like fell flat. But the harness is really, I think, where it's at in terms of extending what we were doing with the webs, but booking websites, booking hotels, doing business analytics. Like I said, my passion in life now. Those are happening through the harness. And it was just until we got Claude Code, which is, I think, the first massively successful harness, that agents became super popular. And now we're seeing the post-browser web.
Yeah. And I say, and I'll continue to say, we're at version 1.0 of the UI for harnesses. Claude Cowork being, like, we've seen that. I 100% agree. We saw sort of AI browsers which were essentially useless.
Mm-hmm.
And then we saw a desktop application called Claude Work in this case, Claude Cowork in this case, where we're like, holy shit, this is it. This works. It is definitely version 1.0.
Yeah.
This conversational UI is not there. But I think now in hindsight, when I look back, we need the harnesses and the structure and the wherewithal to get the information to where it's usable. And then we start worrying about how we structure it and archive it and interact with it.
I've looked at a lot of research. So I've been my pastime on weekends is looking up cybernetics research from like the 90s. Cybernetics was just too successful. It just kept spawning subfield and subfield after cybernetics that took all the people who were really into cybernetics and then made them very wealthy. So if you want to get good at cybernetics, now's the time. Stafford Beer, which is one of my favorite business consultants ever, right? Just a totally crazy guy, huge lifestyle, larger than life, but definitely a cybernetics nerd. And look, there was a lot of research and thought at the time of how do we present information to people to give them the most capability to take advantage of the massive amount of data, right? And if you look at, he did something called Project CyberSyn, which was an effort to run the entire government and a lot of the industry of Chile via a cybernetic project. And they actually designed this very cool space age looking center where there was all these screens, and they had put a huge amount of thought into the types of signals that people would receive and then they could react to. So this was the signals you're going to see. Here's the the dials and knobs that you can turn to fix things like, hey, Pinochet is down there in southern Chile blocking shipments. We better find a way around that and deal with that right now. But one of the things that they thought through very hard, and they have a ton of existing literature on, is the types of signals that people respond to. And I think this is something that you've talked about a lot.
Perfect segue into our end of podcast question, which is, what did you see this week that got you excited? And Google announced Google Omni, which is an anything to anything LLM. No, well, it's not an LLM. We call it an AI, right? Essentially, so if you think about an LLM, large language model, everything goes through the conduit, so to speak, of language, right? You give it an image, it takes that image, it looks at it, it describes it in language, and then it uses that language to do something else. So to your point about kind of multimodal in and out, presenting information in a way that we want to consume it, we want to interrogate the information, the knowledge through video, through text, through colors, through whatever it is. So the promise of Omni is anything to anything. It's not that, but let me show you. I did some experiments.
This as you're pulling this up, the Pope, I did only about 2 paragraphs, but the first paragraph was like, hey, let's not build the Tower of Babel. So when you call something Omni and it's the anything to anything translator, just saying.
Yeah.
Just they got that got people in trouble the first time we did it.
Okay.
According to
so here we go. Did a little experiment. So hopefully you can see this. I'm going to play a little video for you. Hopefully this works. This is
real. You build go-karts.
This is real video.
This is real.
This is real. This is that was me driving a racing car.
Is this up in Sonoma? Is this up north?
Well done.
I recognize the track. It's beautiful.
There you go. So that's me driving my racing car and crashing. So painful exercise. So I took that input video. If you're watching along, it's a video at a racetrack looking at the back of a racing car. And I took that video and I asked Omni, I said, take that original video and add a car that is chasing behind this car and has to dodge the car in the video, the one that I'm driving. The chasing car should be yellow, should be number 26. It should be an open wheel vintage Formula Ford. You guys don't need to worry about what an open wheel vintage Formula Ford is. I know.
I feel like I'm going to learn right now.
Yeah, well, you might. It's obscure, and that was kind of part of the challenge. So let me change screens here.
This looks like it.
Okay, here we go. Can you see it now? All right.
Yes.
So we should see the yellow car. Let's go.
Well, it did produce, I think, a Ford, but then it also followed you off the road, crashed, and then became a line drawing.
Yes. Now, I did ask it to become a line drawing. I forgot to mention that. So that
okay, good, because I was like, that's a very odd quirk.
It does a couple of interesting things. So I spin off the side of the track. The yellow car decides to turn around and join me on the side of the track, and then I reverse into a block of concrete that explodes. Not in the original video. There we go. So the promise of Omni also that I didn't mention is it's supposed to understand physics, which it sort of did, right? This one was similar, but I wanted an elephant running in the background. Well, let's have a little look at that one.
Feels like the elephant was chasing you versus racing, but the other cars at least keep going.
So it did a couple of things. First of all, there's an elephant running behind me. I spin off. It's cute. It's worried about me. It looks over. It follows the fact that I'm actually crashing beside it and then walks around. Randomly, other vehicles have been added to the video. So look, fun and everything, but the point of this stuff is I think, is you need to be able to guide it, direct it, edit the video in a way that really follows your expectations. And our expectations are driven by a couple of different things, physics being one of them, which actually does a reasonably good job at, right? It understood that the elephant needed to slow down because I'd crashed and come to a stop. So it stopped running, it started walking and walked around us. So to your point, Matt, O-rings, this is a better O-ring than we have seen before, but it ain't there yet.
Yeah, I feel like AI has gotten quite good at the types of things that are directly trainable, like lots of corpuses of text, image completion, and then it gets it wrong in certain things. And I think one of the ways I've been articulating in my head of like how it's missing is that there's these kind of like spiritual elements, which are things that are not physical and they're not explicit, but like social cues, humor, storytelling. It just misses. It's just not doesn't have that intrinsic understanding of what's right. And we talked about this in our last episode. And here, I think it's doing something that's extremely technically apt, but missing the point, which is no, you don't understand racing, right? And it's not that it couldn't. Maybe if it had thought about it a lot longer, maybe you could do some prompting technique. But the fact that it doesn't snap towards what would be obvious to us, I think is because racing is something that we have maybe a type of sensitivity to that is not explicit. It's more, no, you haven't done that, you know?
Yeah, well, I would expand. I think you're 100% right, but I would expand that challenge to being much broader. Body language, gestures, facial expressions, even information is encoded in colors quite often, right? We as a species have learned to extract signals from very many different sort of physical and digital things, cultural things as well, phenomena. The challenge with LLMs that I don't think will ever be overcome as with them as a technology is that everything has to go through this translation into and out of language. And language is good, but it's imprecise,
Yep.
right? And it's not always efficient. So that's why I got super excited about Omni. It hasn't delivered at all, but when we can get close, I suppose when we can widen that aperture and incorporate more of those signals, more of those channels for information, more of that encoding of information into AI and make it useful.
Just to finish the what happened this week, there's these things called the Erdish problems, which are famous math problems that the speed addicted mathematician Erdish found. You know, he cataloged these, and so they've been a very popular set. Now, several of these Erdish problems have been solved in the past, but what happened this last week is they announced the solution via AI of a very well-studied Erdish problem. So this wasn't just one that happened to be a problem that nobody had looked at. This is one that had been studied for many years by top mathematician, and everybody thought there was a great answer to it. And AI just found very deep connection to other math problems that allowed it to significantly improve the result. And I could talk about what the result was. But
this is really important. Is this novel? Is it net new? Is it creative? Or is it filling in? Is it interpolating a solution?
You know, and that's what we're going to talk. We talk about O-rings and interpolation, filling in the blank, or creativity. And I think this is a gray area between them. It's certainly an advance in capabilities. But essentially what happened is that there was a set of hard, non-obvious connections between certain topics in math that the AI was able to do. And a human could have done them, but the fact that there were several that were kind of daisy chained together, they were all difficult. They all required a lot of knowledge of different fields, and you had to do all of them together to get the result. And so it's kind of like the tenacity and the wide understanding helped it solve this problem. It didn't seem like the complete genius, stroke of genius insight. It was more, I think, something that had a lot of capacity to try things over and over again, a wide knowledge. It was very smart, and then kind of daisy chain these things together. But now mathematicians are not the only game in town, and so this is one of those things where you'd also expect, as the AI gets better, for more math problems to fall. And we've seen an accelerating rate. If you look at the Erdos problems, it's really nice because it's a constrained set. It's already publicly known. Everybody knows it. Everybody knows if there's a solution or not. And so the fact that AI has been progressively knocking these things down and solving harder ones or ones that have been well studied is, again, creating more counter to our earlier thesis that it's actually doing things that humans couldn't do. Now, the interesting thing, though, is if it creates new techniques. Math is just finding connections between things. I have a undergraduate degree in math, but I'm not like a researcher. But the more things there are in math, the more work there is for mathematicians. The easier it is to learn a topic means there's more audience that are going to find your obscure papers interesting and invite you to go, get tea with them, which is really the goal of a mathematician, is to get invited to a colloquium or something like that. Yeah, something like that. You just go explain your problem. I call it colloquium. Physicists, like, what do? You say you're famous. You just get invited to give talks, and then other smart people clap. I mean, that's all there really is in life. So if it's easier to learn math, if it's easier to understand obscure topics with AI, if there's more results that connect obscure topics, this creates larger audiences that will be excited about your math result. Maybe similar to Mythos and cybersecurity, it creates more opportunities for mathematician. It's not obvious. It's very weird. Anybody who says that AI is not capable of doing math is now, I think, provably wrong. I think this is one of those moments like AlphaGo that really puts us in our place.
That might be an episode in and of itself. I have a bunch of questions, but as usual, we're way past our time. So, Matt, I guess we'll land it there and add that to the list of topics for the next episodes.
All right. Well, we'll see you again next week. And thanks to everybody for tuned in all the way to the end, all 23% of you.
There you go. Thanks, Matt. See ya.
See ya.